Hey, everybody out there in comic book land, it's time for another edition of What You're Reading. I get a lot of questions from you people, and I answer them on the Ask Chuck Dixon show. And by the way, I am Chuck Dixon, uh, coming to you from my vast Dixonverse complex. Anyway, I frequently get asked, what are you reading? When you're not writing, what are you reading? Reading for pleasure, reading for research, reading to educate yourself. And so I explore that here and give you my opinion from the perspective of a professional writer about what I'm reading. So I guess it's like this is my book report. um, I read this book, On Locations, by Mark Kamen. I'm guessing at his last name. And Mark Kamen is a guy who he worked for a long time. He's a producer now, but he worked for a long time as locations manager on movies and television shows. And what does a locations manager do? Well, when you're shooting outside the sound stages and shooting outside the backlots, shooting on real locations, you need an advance man to go ahead and not only find the locations you need, which is a really specific talent in itself, but then also make all the legal and other, nitpicky negotiations, permits, bribes, whatever it takes to secure that location for the period of time that the film crew needs it. If that means shutting down streets, clearing buildings, whatever. And this guy was very, very talented, and he's a North Jersey native and spent a lot of time in New York City, and he just has an eye for locations and a terrific like photographic memory of places he's been and things he's seen. And he relates. He's a very, very good writer as well. He writes book reviews and things like that. In addition, he's a man of many talents, and because working as location manager, working as any kind of a crew member on a movie, it's a freelance gig thing. So a lot of times you got to wear a lot of hats. You've got to be able to do a lot of different things to pay the rent. And but it's just extraordinarily talented, and the book is filled with anecdotes. The first major film he worked on was Quiz Show, and when he went to work on it, he heard they were filming in New York City, and he shows up and he doesn't know much about this job of locations, and he basically volunteers along with 30 other people to scout locations, and they're not paid to do this. And the what they're told by the producer they're dealing with is, and he's the line producer. A line producer is actually on the set making things happen, as opposed to sitting by the pool collecting a paycheck. The line producer, told these 30 scouts, location scouts, whoever brings back the best locations gets a job on the flick, right? So you're working volunteer. And so he secured himself a paying gig by finding a number of locations in Manhattan where they could shoot Quiz Show. And then he got an even bigger gig and a bigger job on on Quiz Show, because he remembered a building in a town in North Jersey that could sub for 30 Rock, Rockefeller Center, NBC headquarters in New York. And he saved the film production a fortune, because if they were going to have to reproduce the lobby of 30 Rock on a soundstage, it was going to cost a lot of money. It was going to cost even more money if they wanted to actually film at 30 Rock, because NBC was going to make them pay through the nose. But he found this building, and it was a derelict, abandoned building. And it was being held by a nonprofit organization with the idea in mind that they were going to historically register it, because it was a 1920s Art Deco building that looked remarkably like Rockefeller Center. Smaller building, but looked remarkably like, in the interiors, like Rockefeller Center. And if you're interested at all in this stuff, you got to read this book, because he goes through what it took to secure that building, and the things they had to do to the building, because it had been derelict for decades, to clean it up enough and make it look like the lobby in Rockefeller Center, all cleaned up and pristine condition as it would have been in the 1950s when the film was set. And in that story, he tells about how he showed up one day and there were some set directors taking furniture from the building and loading it into a truck. And he said, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? This furniture belongs to this building. And he goes, yeah, but we're taking it because we can use it on other sets. We're set people. We're always looking for interesting pieces of furniture and things like that. And he says, well, does the line producer know about this? And the set guys say, who do you think sold it to us? And that's not his only example of like petty theft and grand larceny in the film business. He was working on a series for one of the networks, and it was a crime series set in New York, and they were shooting it in New York. And he was told by a line producer to go to Chelsea Market, and Chelsea Market is a factory building that's been converted into a Tony, sort of mall with bakeries and delis and things like that. Sort of a artsy fartsy food court combined with a farmer's market. And he was told to go there and check out this location. So he gets there, and there's crew members from the show and lumber that had been ordered for the production. And he recognizes these display cases and stuff that they had purchased as set pieces in previous episodes of this particular television show. And he asks one of the crew guys, what are you doing? He says, we're building a liquor store. And he says, we're going to shoot an episode, and this is for an episode. We need a liquor store set. And one of the guys said, no, it's an actual liquor store. And what he found out was the two producers of the show were using production company funds to build themselves an actual liquor store that they would own in Chelsea Market. They were using crew members and company times. If you ever wonder why TV shows and movies cost so much, this is why. This is padding the budget. Ultimately, the network and production company found out what these guys were doing and fired them both and canceled the show. So, and from what Mark Kamen says, they never worked in the business again. So there is a limit to how much Hollywood will put up with. Now, Kamen, the bulk of the book and what Kamen is most famous for was he was locations guy for The Sopranos, every season of The Sopranos. And he tells some fascinating stories about that. One of which was when the pilot was shot, between the time the pilot was shot and HBO greenlighting it, it went to a number of different places. They went to a number of different places with the pilot and got shot down. And it was over a year until HBO greenlit the show. Well, now a year has passed. That's an eternity in the entertainment business. And when they went back to use the Satriali set, the meat market, the owner no longer wanted them to shoot there. And so Mark, who was new on the show, he didn't work on the pilot. His first job was the very first episode. He had to find a building enough like it that viewers wouldn't notice the difference between one episode and the other. And I really got to go back and check, because I never noticed that it's a different building in the rest of the series than it is in the pilot. But he did an awesome job of recreating that location in an entirely different place. and the book is full of stories like that. Uh, in, there's a lot of funny stories about the Soprano House. And again, in the year and a half almost that passed between the pilot being filmed, the first episode of the first season, um, when Mark goes to the homeowner to secure the use of the house for the rest of the season, the homeowner says, "I don't want you people back. You tore up my lawn. You put holes in my roof." And the homeowners is bitching and complaining and making it sound like them shooting this film, this pilot at his house was the most miserable experience of his life. And so Mark Kamen has to go, well, you know, we really need to shoot here. We can't afford to reshoot the pilot scenes outside the house in a different house. I mean, this is a very distinctive look, and he just couldn't recreate it. They needed his house. So they made all kinds of deals with this guy saying, we won't shoot the interiors. We'll give you more money. We'll give you this. We'll fix the roof. We'll redo your lawn, resod your lawn. We'll do all this stuff. And the guy agreed to it. And Kamen says, well, and I was, it's hard. He said, yeah, you can use it for the rest of the season. And Kamen says, well, the homeowner was lying because every single episode they would have to renegotiate. This guy with every single, and he realized as they got deeper and deeper into the series that he really had the production company by the short hairs because they had to keep filming at this house, and he kept making more and more demands and becoming more and more difficult to work with. But they had to deal with this guy. But as Kamen says, he lied to me, but I lied to him too because I told him we're never going to shoot the interiors. We've recreated the interior house on a set. We're just going to have to show, Tony and the other characters going in and out through the front door once in a while. And of course, that was a lie because, if you watch the series, there's a lot of scenes where they're, going from the house out to the pool and back and forth. So they shot quite a bit in the interior of the actual house as well. But just the fact that they kept holding them up. And ultimately, James Gandolfini got his revenge on the homeowner because it's like season 5, and the homeowner feels like, oh, I'm friends with the cast. They all know me. I'm hanging out with the Sopranos. And he went up to Gandolfini, who on that day wasn't in a particularly good mood. And he started talking to him. Hey, Jim, this, that, the other thing, so and so. And Gandolfini turned to him and said, who are you again? and came and said he was there and saw this. He said the guy was completely crushed because Gandolfini pretended he didn't know who he was after the many, many times they had spoken together. Another great series of stories was about the Bada Bing. The Bada Bing was actually shot at an actual strip club, and they had to shoot between 2 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon on Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays because those are the only times that the strip club owner was willing to shut the place down for them, because the rest of the time he was making a fortune. And as they learned later, the strip club owner was connected to the Genovese crime family, so he actually was a mob guy. And Kamen tells a funny story where he's talking to him about when they're going to shoot and the schedule and what they're going to do and what they're going to need, how many extras they're going to have. And the strip club owner says, hey, I saw that episode where you had like the floating poker game. You had the illegal underground poker game. He goes, I used to do that. I'm thinking of getting back into that. I watched that show and I remembered how much money I made doing that. I'm thinking of doing that again. And Mark Kamen's like, there's probably 16 microphones from various law enforcement agencies hidden all over this room. And so he begins saying, oh, I don't think that's a very good idea. Oh, that's illegal. Oh, no, I don't want you to think I would ever suggest that you open an illegal poker game. Because Kamen thought, hey, I'm going to be indicted here. It's going to make it sound like I gave the guy the idea. So, but the book's full of a lot of great stories like that, terrific insights into, how difficult filmmaking is, how complicated, how many moving parts, you read things like this and you wonder how movies and TV shows ever get made, because it's all so complicated, and particularly when they move out into the real world and have to deal with unions and things like that. But if you're interested in location management and film production at all, this is a really interesting view of filmmaking. And if you're a Sopranos fan, you got to read this, because he's got some stories you're not going to read anywhere else. He was really on the inside, working closely with, David Chase and the cast and the different producers and the different writers. And his insight into the series as an insider is absolutely fascinating. If you're as big a Sopranos fan as I am, it really is a must-read book. Another book I read was, this is volume 5 of Tarzan from Dark Horse, the Jesse Marsh years. Now, Jesse Marsh is an artist who drew Tarzan for, oh my God, decades. Gaylord Dubois, prolific comic writer, wrote all of the scripts. And as you can see here, Marsh has a very simple approach to comics. He's not a show off. He doesn't have a bravura style. He has a very straightforward style that when you read the stories, you realize it's very elegant. He doesn't waste any time. He doesn't waste any space. He tells the story as it is. He's very good at drawing animals, very good at drawing locations. And I like the stories a lot. This volume in particular was done during the time when Lex Barker was the movie Tarzan. And I don't know what constrictions Dell was under from the film producers or from Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated, but Gaylord Dubois sort of walks the line between the movie Tarzan and the Edgar Rice Burroughs Tarzan. Jane is spoken about in these stories, but never shown. And that may be because in the movies at the time, Jane was not a character. She was never referenced. But oddly, Boy, not Korak, the original son of Tarzan, but Boy from the movies shows up in a few of the stories. And then we never see Cheetah. Cheetah's not part of it. Cheetah's stand-in here is Tarzan's original lower primate buddy, Nakima. Nakima was in the Burroughs books, and Nakima is one of my favorite characters in all of fiction. And so it was fun to read these stories with Nakima rather than Cheetah as Tarzan's buddy. And Nakima's a monkey, a small monkey that you have to read the stories. If you've ever read the original Tarzan books, you'll understand my affection for Nakima as a character. So one of the few animal characters that really comes through on the written page, and the way Burroughs wrote him. And so and then there's other things from the original Tarzan books that were never in the movies. The land of Powell Don with its prehistoric monsters and things like that. These make appearances in these stories pretty regularly in the Jesse Marsh stories. But I just like a good Tarzan story. And Marsh is a guy who often gets overlooked because his style is so simplistic. But I remember first getting interested in Marsh because Rich Corbin, who I really admired, still admire to this day, Rich Corbin would often mention Jesse Marsh as a big influence on his storytelling and his approach to comics. So if you're a Tarzan fan, these are worth checking out. I think Dark Horse did, maybe 11 volumes, reprinting all of Jesse Marsh's Tarzan material. Now, speaking of jungles, Levon Scourge is book 12 in my Levon Cade series, and it takes Levon to a lot of different places, from rural Mexico and finally to the jungles and rainforests of Vietnam, modern day Vietnam. And as I said, book 12 in the series, this wraps up a whole bunch of storylines from the previous books. If you've been reading these books, um, you're not going to want to miss this one. So anyway, that's it for me for this week's Whatcha Readin'. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all down the road.